Okay, I'm back again. I found a book that's complete. So we'll continue the reading of Cap Moat. This book was dedicated to my wife, Cindy Goodson. Published in 1997, after 15 years trying to get it out of my mind and onto a page. We shall read. This book is based upon actual occurrences and events that took place during my tour of duty in Vietnam from July of 1968 to June of 1969. Even though the entire book is written from memory, I feel confident of its accuracy because the events of that period of time will remain etched into my mind for the duration of my life. And now it's going on tape. CAP was a Special Forces unit. Nah, not true. We went over that in the earlier video. This is an editorial mistake. It didn't get caught. Marines were special ops. It's just a matter of semantics, but I don't want to make the Army mad, so special ops works. Which the United States Marine Corps developed in Vietnam as an answer to the never-ending question, why am I here? CAP was the abbreviated version of the name Combined Action Program, which was a nebulous title for a unique, specially trained unit of men. Generally, each unit consisted of 6 to 8 men, including 1 radio man and 1 corpsman, a medic, according to Army rules. These men lived in the jungle with no compound or fire base to offer security, no place to lay one's head. The only time a CAP Marine left the jungle was when he was rotating home, wounded or dead. My unit was CAP 124. The number 1 in Vietnamese, the number 1 in Vietnamese language, I should read, shouldn't I? Is Moat, hence the title of this book, Cap Moat. As the plot of the book unravels, you will discover that the CAP Marines were responsible for 2 primary functions, each of which involved multitudes of equally important responsibilities. We were first and foremost to become deeply involved on a personal basis with the Vietnamese people, helping them throughout their daily lives with whatever small way we could. We were to help their sick to heal, the starving to survive, those in fear to be comforted, and the orphaned to find a home. We were to teach the farmers how to improve their farming methods in simple ways. Basic tools were brought in to decrease their workload, while at the same time enhancing our purpose and communicating our friendly intentions to everyone. The Vietnamese were very proud people with many ideas and beliefs which created an invisible and in some cases an impenetrable barrier. Yet, if you approach them with sincerity, with your heart on your sleeve, and with a desire to become one of them, they would accept you, follow you, and learn from you. As long as you were willing to accept and become involved in every facet of their life, and do, say, eat, and drink everything they did, your mission would succeed. Most of all, you would survive. Remember, there's only 8 of us living in an area, surviving in an area the size of a county in the United States. Having gained acceptance, our second responsibility was to train new warriors in each village, young men ages 14 and up, who were willing and eager to learn how to seek out and to destroy the enemy that plagued their villages, who unquestionably understood the oppression by the forces of communism that plagued their homeland. Side by side with these Vietnamese, we fought enemy forces ranging from a single Viet Cong to untold numbers of the enemy, including the NVA, North Vietnamese Army. Our unified effort destroyed them and drove them from the villages and from the area. 8 Marines, people. Side by side with these Vietnamese, we fought enemy forces ranging from a single Viet Cong to untold numbers of the enemy, including the NVA, North Vietnamese Army. Our unified effort destroyed them, drove them from the villages and from the area. Initially, I entered the Cap Marines with a misconception that I would be training a bunch of jungle natives who knew nothing about the methods and strategy of our true combat. It only took a few short days being a member of an actual Cap unit to realize that the person who really needed to listen and learn was the new kid on the block. Yours truly. Even the youngest of the men in the popular forces had experienced far more combat than most American soldiers. Let that sink in. The PS only needed training in respect to the use and maintenance of American-made weapons, a skill each man could be taught within a matter of hours. The PS taught us, especially me, far more about jungle warfare and survival in the bush than the Marines had ever hoped to accomplish. And that's a fact. The Vietnamese were very adept at living in the harshest of conditions. They could spot booby traps on the darkest of nights. They could teach us how to actually smell the presence of the enemy. I now scoff at that because I should have known already. I came into combat from being somewhat of a country boy on my grandpa's farm. And there are odors that you readily identify with objects, animals, and people. But in combat, those are enhanced significantly. Okay, I digress. Where was I? They could spot booby traps on dark nights. I read that part. After living among the Vietnamese people and fighting beside them in numerous battles, I began to realize that other units throughout Vietnam were speaking metaphorically, fighting in the dark. Unnecessarily risking and losing lives because they never took the time to get to know the people they were trying so desperately to help. I grieved for American lives, lost to booby traps that even the smallest Vietnamese child could have spotted. During my brief time as a grunt with Alpha Company, 2nd Marine Amphibious Force, I had virtually no contact with the South Vietnamese. I was with Alpha 17 guns. I was a machine gunner with a grunt unit on Hill 10 outside of Da Nang, Vietnam. I had virtually no contact with the South Vietnamese soldiers. All I knew about them was the rumors I heard. Never even heard of the popular forces. I heard of ARVN. I witnessed ARVNs and, never fought alongside of them, but you could see them driving down the road occasionally or whatever, but that was meaningless to me. I was assigned strictly to Hill 10, Alpha 17 guns. The only things I knew about them were the rumors from other Marines, passed on by their own personal experience. Rumors which portrayed the South Vietnamese soldier as a weak, unreliable coward that no one could trust. That, I soon discovered, was far from the truth. Another here we go. It's good. Another of our responsibilities was the care and protection of an artillery base known as Fat City. It stood right in the middle of our IEP, our area of prime responsibility. Our small unit of 6 men was responsible for recon and protection for a base of over 400 men who never understood how we managed to survive outside the compound. It's okay. We never understood either. The Cat Marines had an important mission, a special purpose. Many of them gave their lives in an effort to help the people of Vietnam. This book portrays their story and their true feelings. The renditions portray actual events, hopefully revealing the sorrows, the agonies, the sincerity, the joy, and the hopes of their daily lives. This is their story, a true one, retold from the haunts of my mind. In spite of countless hours, days, and years I have spent trying to remember the names of those men with whom I fought, my mind still refuses to cooperate. Because of this, the names of my fellow Marines are, as used in this book, are fictitious, with the exception of Earl Jones and John Szymanski. Those were 2 men that I could remember. And for these men, I have documentation to prove their names. If, as you read this story, you discover you're one of the men who shared the jungle with me, or you know someone who might have been there, please contact me. That has happened. Scott Cruz was my replacement. He didn't fight alongside me. He took my place. Thanks, Scott. I appreciate you, bro. Find my place again here. It is for this reason I have described the men as black, white, or Puerto Rican, thinking it might help to locate them. A reunion is long overdue. Together we could create an even more accurate picture of our life in Vietnam. Unfortunately, this book has never been republished. And since I'm 72, I doubt it will. If you ever read this story, CO stands for Commanding Officer. The fake name for him was Colonel Andrews. I won't even go through all these. You'll hear about them as we peruse through the book. Acknowledgements. Very important. First and foremost, I wish to thank my wife, Cindy, for her undying devotion to helping me see this book to its completion. She changed an animal into a man. And from that came the words. In addition, I wish to thank my children, Brad and Haley. Brad likes to be called Ton, because Ton was my counterpart in Vietnam. We saved each other's lives continuously. We should thank Brad and Haley for their continual support, even when it took time away from them. Their faith in their father renewed my resolve many times. To Ton, not my Ton, but the Ton who was my counterpart, whom I hope is somewhere alive and well, I express my thanks for the many times he saved my life. Maybe someday I will be able to deliver a copy of this book to him. Last but not least, I dedicate this book to the memory of a good friend and comrade in arms, John Szymanski. Had he not been cut down in the prime of his life by a drunk driver in Minnesota, we might have co-written this book. I will miss him always. I sincerely appreciate the relentless pursuit by Fran Vick and Charlotte Wright to see this book to completion in spite of the numerous obstacles hindering their progress, one of which was me. I appreciate the efforts of Professor John M. Carroll of Lamar University for providing most of the historical and explanatory footnotes. Thanks to all of you for making your dream come true. That's a picture of my unit, not the cap unit. That's my boot camp unit. I'm in there. Chapter 1, Meade River. The ominous cloud of the reality of Operation Meade River was still shadowing me that day. I received word from Top Sergeant Bentley, who wanted me to report to his quarters. As I left my tent, I started the short walk to the top's quarters. The shadow overwhelmed me, and I drifted into the endless memory of the first battle of Meade River. The operation had started during the waning days of the monsoon season, a season with an awesome ability to inflict our already haunted lives with constant miseries. To begin with, there was 1 inch of dry land left to stand on, and you remained constantly drenched, soaked, chilled to the bone. You slept when you could sleep, with your head lying against a soggy rice paddy dike, while your body endured an unending bath in the stagnant, leech-infested waters of the paddy. As if to assure you that miseries could be worse, hordes of mosquitoes possessing the bites of horseflies descended upon you like squadrons of fighter planes. If you were Texan, you might understand what I'm saying there. The bites of horseflies. When I wrote this, I never even dreamed of anybody not ever being bit by a horsefly. But the mosquitoes in Vietnam came up and said howdy. Their bites hurt. Perhaps some good evolved from the whole scene, however. Patience or willpower, whichever label you choose to slap on it. In normal situations, you would simply get up and leave such situations behind. Therein lies the catch. One quick move, one snap of a twig, or slap at a mosquito could bring a bullet to your brain. You had to remain virtually motionless or become impervious to the sucking of the leeches, the bites of the mosquitoes, and itching knowledge that jungle rot was attacking all parts of your body. To live, you had to set aside all of these nagging little problems. The Vietnamese claimed that rubbing buffalo dung all over your body would ward off any and all pests. I had my doubts because I knew the VC also packed buffalo dung into their homemade booby traps and laced tips of punty stakes with it. This process nearly always led to blood poisoning, gangrene, and death within 24 hours. So the idea of purposely rubbing it on my body, even if it did repel mosquitoes, seemed an invitation to suicide. It was on a dreary, rain-soaked day in November that the helo lifted my company about 15 miles southwest of Da Nang into the depths of the jungle, an area we had dubbed as Death Valley. Appropriately dubbed too, since we figured there was always a 90% guarantee of being dismembered by a booby trap or shot in the back by a Viet Cong hiding in the spider traps. Excuse me. As the Chinook started chopping in between the trees surrounding the paddy we were to leap into, rounds began crackling from all directions, impacting the thin shell of the Chinook with a quick thud, and then continuing on a brief ricochet until each bullet found its mark or disappeared into the hole somewhere. Casualties were instantaneous. A lump grew in my throat, My gut knotted into a small yet ominous ball. Death and destruction engulfed me. A guy I hardly knew screamed, clutched his head, and fell from the helicopter as it passed about 20 feet above the elephant grass below. He never felt around as his lifeless body disappeared in the depths of the razor-sharp grass. I froze momentarily watching the dead man fall, wondering if a round had my name on it. Pardon me for a minute. Drink of water. As the Chinook started chopping in between the trees surrounding the paddy we were to leap into, rounds cracking from all directions, impacting the shell. I read that part. I am sorry. I froze momentarily watching the dead man fall, wondering if a round had my name on it. Scared? Hell yes, I was scared. The CO's yell to jump suddenly jolted me back to reality. I found myself leaping from the hovering Chinook to the ground below. The drop to the ground seemed like eternity as other death screams bombarded my brain. My body fell heavily against the rice paddy dyke, momentarily loosening the grip I had on my M16. The enormous fear I had of losing my weapon in the depths of the rice paddy forced my hands to develop a white-knuckled grip on the rifle. A sudden burst from the AK-47 in the hands of the VC, hiding in a nearby tree line, sent me rolling and tumbling into the nearest cover, a rotten, stench-filled log. A handful of other Marines followed me to my temporary haven, where we all sat staring at each other as we forced our racing minds to regain control and plan our next move. God, next move. Where? How? The gooks were everywhere, surrounded by death. No one even noticed leeches as they stretched their way through our clothing, searching for a tender spot to start sucking away our blood. Sounding out quietly, I located my squad, which was still intact and had incurred no casualties. Take that tree line to the north, the CO's voice had bellowed through the radio. He remobilized. We struck out toward our assigned objective. Rapidly spreading out, we advanced on line, ripping the tree line apart with a continuous deadly spray of lead, and grenades. An occasional law, the military's replacement for the bazooka, would burst with a tremendous roar as someone fired at what he thought he saw. The jungle was ungodly thick. The knee-deep water and the muck clutched at our legs like 1,000 hands trying to slow us down. In all this muck and dense growth, we could barely see each other, much less the calm. How could we possibly seek and destroy something we could not see? Automatic fire hit us like a tidal wave from the tree line on our right. We turned instantly and retaliated with answering fire. Suddenly, one Marine panicked with a spray of lead in all directions. His initial burst caught the first sergeant in the back, sending him sprawling forward, face forward, into the waters of the rice paddy, never to move again. The panic-stricken Marine vomited all over himself and fell into a dead faint. The gravity of the situation momentarily stopped our assault, allowing the VC an opportunity to increase their attack with hellish intensity. Men started dropping like flies as the lead and shrapnel tossed their bodies in various grotesque positions. Everywhere, men were groping in pain, trying to desperately find shelter, while others were simply begging God to let them live. As suddenly as our assault had begun, it ended. Men not mortally wounded or in total shock were running in all directions in a last-ditch effort to gain cover before another barrage of bullets and shrapnel ripped them apart. A man beside me screamed, dropped his rifle, and grabbed his left arm, staring at a gaping hole that was once his elbow. Quickly, I shoved him to cover. The corpsman had his hands full elsewhere, so I removed 2 bandages from the pouch on my belt. Using the first as packing, I wrapped the second around it and tied it tight. The bleeding would not stop. Using my last bandage, I fashioned a tourniquet around the wound. Ah! He screamed in pain. I had nothing to offer the tortured man. Only the corpsman was allowed to carry medicine. Sorry, man. I'm sure it hurts like hell, I said as I finished patching the wound. Let's pack you up. The bleeding had slowed but refused to be stopped. The wounded man groaned through clenched teeth as I hoisted him to the fireman's carry, which is literally putting the man across your shoulders, as you've seen some pictures of in war movies or people carrying game that they've killed. Anyway, I put him into a fireman's carry. Momentarily staggering under the load, I searched the skies for the medevacs and saw them descending behind some trees on the opposite side of the paddies. The journey across was a good 100 yards with no cover, that is, unless you were a leech. With rotten luck, to attempt a crossing, what rotten luck? To attempt a crossing unencumbered would have been dangerous. But a trek carrying a wounded man was suicide. Then again, to simply stand there with a wounded man on my back, then again, so was simply standing there with a wounded man on my back. Can't even read my own writing, can I? Sorry about that. Besides, with half his arm blown away, he might bleed to death if I decided to wait until the battle subsided to a safe level. Tightening my cinch and my nerve, I leapt from the cover and began staggering the labor weave pattern across the rice paddy with a wounded man draped across my shoulder. Who is this man? I thought. I didn't even know him. Surely I recognized him. I studied his face. No, not even an inkling of his name. Not that it made any difference. I just felt I should know his name. The knee-deep, fetid water and muck gripped my legs, slowing my progress to a seemingly hopeless effort as the opposite side loomed far into the distance. The 100 yards seemed more like a mile. A burst of fire from my left sent water spraying all around me. Suddenly, I felt or actually heard a thud which catapulted us both behind the safety of a tree line, covering the rice paddy dike. I set the wounded man against the dike for a moment to see if I could locate our attackers. He groaned with pain. I studied the area we had just crossed. Nothing. No movement. Gunfire. Nothing. Momentarily, we were safe. I turned and checked the wounded man over and was shocked to discover he'd been hit again. Through the same arm, the bullet lodging in his gut. We were both soaked in his blood. Ignoring the arm, I applied a pressure bandage from his own pouch to his torso wound and helped him slowly to his feet. We had another 100 yards to go to reach the choppers, and a fireman's carry was out of the question due to the chance of aggravating the gut wound. With his body leaning heavily against mine, we woodenly approached the medevac area, keeping a strained eye on every bush, tree, and blade of grass. I wasn't sure how I would or could react if we were attacked again, but I had resolved not to let the Viet Cong kill the man after getting him this far. The battle behind us still raged in full fury. We stumbled into the medevac area, which was strewn with dead and dying men. I tried to settle him onto a soggy ground as gently as possible, but he gasped heavily despite my efforts. Chopper Wash hammered us as the Hueys lifted off with their wounded. I need a cigarette, he moaned. No way, I answered. Cigarettes are out with gut wounds. He smiled a weak, pleading smile. Oh, come on. It's probably my last anyway, he said. I studied his face and searched my soul for a plausible argument. No reason why he should not have a cigarette. He was right. Normally, gut wounds were a promise of death. I could not argue with him. Where are your cigarettes? I asked, my eyes searching for a telltale bulge that would reveal the hidden pack. And in my left chest pocket, he stammered out as the pain stabbed through his body. I slowly pulled out the cigarettes, making sure I didn't cause him any more pain. Removing one from the pack, I reluctantly gave in and lit the first cigarette of my life, possibly his last, and handed it to him with a prayer. God, I hope he makes it, I thought. I gently shook his uninjured hand and promised to kill the VC that nailed him. Some promise when you could not even see the enemy, much less destroy him. Gathering my weapons and my nerve, I started my trek back to the waiting, gut-wrenching hell of the firefight. The CO, Captain Roll from Alpha Company, was hovering behind the protected knoll a safe 100 yards from the battle, surrounded by a squad of lucky Marines. He yelled me over. "What's going on out there, Goodson?" he yelled. "What's going on?" I screamed. "We're being destroyed." "What the hell does it look like?" I waved my arm back towards the battle scene, the uncountable bodies of dead and dying men. Dying Marines. Luckily, Captain Roll ignored my snide comment, or maybe he realized my present mental state was borderline psychotic. Anyway, he calmly asked, "What do you suggest?" My mind raced with recollections of the battle I just left. I tried to remember if I had any inkling of our enemy's position. All I can say is that Gooks are hiding somewhere in the tree line. I pointed to a position on a map that lay before him. "I think you should pull us back and call in every piece of artillery, cobras, jets, tanks, whatever you can get. There are not enough men left in my platoon to even hope to oust those Gooks." With that comment, I turned on my heel and went to rejoin my diminished troops, leaving him with the decision that meant life or death to us all. I wish that I had been a seasoned veteran with the right answer for the CO. Unfortunately, I was not. I had been in a number of firefights, but none of them lasted more than a few minutes. I had previously seen wounded men and dead men, but never so many. This battle had lasted hours. My fellow Marines were laid scattered before me. The veterans, the old-timers I had depended upon, were among the dead and wounded. So now my survival and that of others depended solely on my own expertise. We were unable to pinpoint the enemy's exact location. All we knew was that they were somewhere in the tree line. I felt ashamed that I could not give the CO more information than that, but I was also upset that we had been thrust into a hopeless situation. It turned out that it was actually a machine gun nest about 40 feet up in the air above our heads. We were shooting straight into the jungle. Straight into the jungle. Never even hit the enemy. Never even knew where they were because they were covered in dense growth. They had a beeline on us though with those 51 caliber machine guns. That's what wasted us. As I reached the dike where the man I carried had been hit a second time, I cautiously peered through the trees to see if there was any sign of the enemy. The rattling gunfire sounded like a string of fireworks, interrupted by an occasional boom from grenades. I studied the expansive terrain, looking for a safe way to cross. The smell of death hit me like a whip, making my hands sweat profusely, and fear settled somewhere in a small corner of my brain. I simply couldn't take my eyes off the countless bodies. No, not just bodies, but dead Marines, lying in the stench of the rice paddies. I don't know how long I squatted there, in an uncontrollable stupor, seconds, minutes, and eternity. A hand on my shoulder jolted me back to reality. It was Danny, leader of the third squad, returning from dropping off another wounded soldier. It could have just as easily been a Gook sneaking up on me. I had to gain control over my mind before I joined the list of dead Marines. "Hey, you're going to grow roots if you don't move from that spot," he whispered. A feeling of guilt crept in my mind. I hoped he hadn't noticed the trembling racing through my body during the momentary stupor. I feared the label of coward much more than I feared the dangers of the rice paddy. Danny threw a cautious glance in the direction we had gone. I anticipated his thoughts. "Danny, let's set up a zigzag pattern for different approaches. That may create some confusion," I suggested. You set up about 25 feet over there. I pointed toward a nearby clump of bamboo growth just south of our position. I'll go first, I whispered. You follow about 5 seconds later. He sauntered off behind the bamboo clump. Good luck, I thought as I watched him disappear behind the slender arms of bamboo. Once he had settled in, I bit my lip, leaped over the dike, and started a zigzagging pattern across the paddock. Smoke from the gunpowder and the explosives hovered over the water, giving it the foreboding look of an old foggy swamp in a horror movie. The only problem was that this fog was laced with the real bodies, real death. As the muck sucked at my legs, in the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of Danny running off to my left. It was working. They couldn't side in on both of us, or couldn't decide who to concentrate on. With luck, we'd both make it. I felt sick from the slow motion feeling of the muck sucking at my feet, bullets spraying water in my face, the fear gripping my body. Surely I'm a sitting duck, I thought, and wondered if each step would be my last. But God was with me. As I neared the opposite side of a few of the Marines lying in the paddy, started wildly waving at me. What the hell, I thought. All at once I knew why they were waving. The muck of the rice paddy had given way to a mound of earth that I assumed to be a part of a dike. As I ran up, the gently sloping mound abruptly opened into a large water-filled crater created by a bombing run sometime in the past. It was too late to stop. My body flew into the air towards the pool of water, then belly flopped into the man-made pond. Suddenly, the noises of the battle subsided to a mute rumble as the weight of my gear pulled me to the bottom of the crater. Strangely, for a moment, I felt peaceful rather than panicky. Overall, overwhelmed with the silent tranquility and then a burning desire for air hit me at the same time, I realized that any explosion under the water would rupture my eardrums. Pulling my way through this vegetation, I finally reached the surface, gasped for air. Boom! Rat-a-rat-tat. The sounds of the war rushed back as my head cleared the surface. I had spent only a few seconds of my underwater refuge. I settled down behind a mound of earth formed by the forces of some previous bombardment and systematically disassembled and cleaned my weapon the best I could. Harry Goad, one of my fellow Marine machine gunners, scuffled over to me. We tried to warn you, man. You okay? Yeah, fine, I assured him. How are things back there? They suck, man. They've had us pinned down behind this mound since you left. Tell me, where to set this pig? He said, pointing to his M60, and I'll give him hell. So far, we just can't locate the bastards. Sorry, I'm no help, I said. I didn't see a thing during my trip across and back. I told the CO we needed to call in some phantoms or something. We were getting low on ammo, and it would be dark soon. A bullet slammed against a rock near our heads and ricocheted over the crater. Just then, the radio in the hands of the man nearest us crackled. We saw him turn and say something to Staff Sergeant Bledsoe, who came running over to us. We're moving back, he said. The SEALs calling in the artillery and the phantoms. Thank God, I thought. I looked around, searching for Danny. Hey, Larry, have you seen Danny? I asked the Marine closest to me. Yeah, man, he answered. He's back in that tree line behind you. I sighed with relief that we both had made it unharmed. We have to pick up the dead tomorrow morning, Bledsoe continued. We can't leave them here, someone behind me argued. They'll be mutilated. We have no choice, Bledsoe screamed. Now move out. He was right, of course. The rice paddy was literally covered with bodies. There were only a handful of us left as we started our retreat. Retreat. Like dogs with tucked tails while our slain buddies lay in silence. waiting for the inevitable. That night, I recalled the sermon or prayer that one of our men had given us before we entered the battle, a very devout minister. He had pleaded with us to refrain from killing. "Thou shalt not kill," he quoted. "God will make the bullets miss you." He said, "Have faith." Little did he know that was one bit of scripture that constantly plagued my mind. I knew we weren't supposed to kill. We all knew that. But we only had two choices as I saw it: kill or be killed. I looked around at my fellow Marines, some outwardly mocking the minister and God, others simply standing there, frozen, expressionless faces, dutifully listening to the man. A few others secretly wiped away tears that somewhere fought their way to its surface. When the sermon was over, I made my way to the pasture. "That's one part I simply don't understand, sir," I stated. "What part is that, Lance Corporal?" he asked. "Thou shalt not kill," I half yelled, emotion swelling up inside me. He looked me over for a minute, and then he searched his brain for what he thought was the right answer. "That's God's law, Lance Corporal. There are no exceptions." I could not accept that. I refused to be condemned to hell for fighting for my country. It was my turn for brain searching. "Well, sir," I began, making every effort to control the emotion bursting inside of me. "I've never been a big Bible reader, but I've got to believe that somewhere in that book of yours, God must say that if I go my 50%, he'll go his." I paused for a minute, then committed my soul to hell. "Sorry, preach," I snapped. "I'm pulling that trigger." I turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness, hoping beyond hope that I had indeed made the right decision. The next day, the preacher was the first killed, the first man to die. Once back in the main unit, Captain Roll reassigned those of us who were unharmed to new squads. Harry Goad and I were reassigned to 2nd Platoon, along with a few others. I took the first watch since sleep was out of the question anyway. The night was dark and still, not even a leaf stirred. For some reason, even the mosquitoes were quiet. The only sound was an occasional sign from one of my fellow Marines, no doubt rehashing the day's battle through his mind. It was around midnight. The silence was deafening. A twig snapped. Silence. Then shuffling footsteps. The others heard it too. Footsteps echoing into the darkness as an unseen enemy attempted to sneak past our right flank. I readied a grenade, pulled the pin, let the handle fly into the darkness, and the noise alerting everyone to my intent. They waited. They waited. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. I let it fly in the direction of our intruder. The grenade's flash illuminated the VC as they tried to sneak through our positions. Immediately, flashes, cracks, and booms broke the silence of the night as death's arms reached for the enemy. I picked out one man, squeezed the trigger repeatedly, and watched every tracer round pass through his body. He kept running. My God, I thought, what are we up against? It was my first evidence of what I had heard from other soldiers was common practice among the VC. Before every battle, they would dope up to make themselves impervious to pain. That, coupled with their belief that they would be reincarnated, made them an awesome enemy that would fight until the last bit of drugged up blood drained from their mutilated bodies. "Come in, Goodson," Top Sergeant Bentley's voice brought me back. Let me try that again. "Come in, Goodson." Top Sergeant Bentley's voice brought me back. Unbelievable. A complete battle had passed through my thoughts during my short distance to his quarters. I shook my head to clear my thoughts. Maybe I need to do that now. Reporting as orders, sir, I stated. At ease, Goodson, your orders are in. Orders, sir? Yep. Looks like you just joined the Cap Marines. He said, Cap, I'd forgotten all about my request, sir. Well, pack your gear, he answered. You're in it now. In what? Voice forgive me. In what? I wondered. My mind briefly scanned the months before when a fellow Marine, Marcelo Gomez, and I first heard about the Cap. Instead of just killing the enemy, the recruiter had said, you'll have a chance to work with the local people and help take care of them. You'll be a part of their lives. We signed up immediately without question and without going through our proper military channels. Our sergeant jumped us severely over that one. Afterward, I forgot the whole idea until Marcelo had shipped out to a Cap command about 2 weeks before. You're scheduled to leave at 1400, he said, the sergeant stated. Bring me back to the present once again. Oh, and leave your weapons in the armory. You'll receive new issue from the Cap. Yes, sir, I answered, turning to leave. I stopped momentarily as the realization of his last statement sank in. Turn in my weapons? I thought, surely not. The look on his face assured me he was not kidding. I gathered up my gear, shook hands with my fellow gunners, and headed for the armory. What you want? A burly-looking sergeant stood behind the dark green counter in the armory. Behind him stood row after row of M16s, M60s, and a multitude of other weapons. I'm shipping out to another unit, so I'm turning in my old friends. I laid my M16, my 45 on the counter. My M60 stayed with the first squad guns. The sergeant simply stood there looking at me. Need that knife too, he ordered. But no buts. All weapons must be turned in. Reluctantly, I loosened the scabbard and laid the knife alongside the other weapons that had been my friends for so long. With a sigh, I picked up my sea bag, turned, and left them behind. An empty feeling settled over me. A jeep waiting outside. Goodson, the driver asked. Yes, I answered. He nodded for me to climb in. I tossed my sea bag into the back, grabbed the side of the jeep, and plopped into the seat beside the driver. Without a word, he jammed the shifter into gear. The tires spun up a cloud of dust as the Jeep responded with a jolt. It sped past the front gate, leaving the rows of concertina wire and Hill 10 behind. I cast a look back at the home in the jungle disappeared. I cast a look as my home in the jungle disappeared in the dust. What now, I wondered. It was a warm, humid 110-degree day as I sat in the Jeep, weaponless, rolling toward a new unknown, the Cap Marines. The driver said nothing. He only peered ahead into the depths of the jungle, a massive green of towering palms engulfed by can't even read my own writing, engulfed by an army of undergrowth that was uninterrupted and only occasionally by a rice paddy at the narrow brown ribbon. Let me reread that for you, please. A massive green of towering palms engulfed by the army of undergrowth that was an uninterrupted. I did it again. A massive green of towering palms engulfed by an army of undergrowth that was interrupted only occasionally by a rice paddy or a narrow brown ribbon of earth we call the road. That, my friends, is the end of chapter 1. I will stop this reading now, we'll return, and we will start chapter 2. Cap. Thank you.